Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Saturday, February 14th, 2026.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. So whether you're celebrating with someone or, just enjoying a quiet Saturday, we're really glad to have you with us.
Definitely.
Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We usually try to look forward at AI, at space, at the next big thing in biotalk. But today, to really understand the future, I think we have to look back.
I agree. Sometimes the past is the best map.
And we are dissecting a brand that I guarantee, absolutely guarantee, you have a visceral, emotional memory of.
Oh, for sure. It's one of those rare corporate names that actually triggers nostalgia. You hear it, and you don't think of a stock price. You think of a specific time and place in your life.
Exactly. I'm talking about Nokia. And right now, I know what you're picturing.
The brick?
The brick, the Nokia 3D310.
Snake.
The game Snake. And that monophonic ringtone that is probably burrowing its way into your head right this second. Yeah.
Connecting people. It was the soundtrack for a whole generation.
But here's the hook, and this is why we're doing this deep dive today. If you think Nokia is just this, tragic story about a cell phone company that got crushed by the iPhone and then just disappeared,
then you're missing the real story.
You're missing about 90% of the actual story.
It's so much stranger and honestly darker, but also more impressive than that.
Okay, so get this.
Yeah.
We are talking about a company that started its life in the 19th century making toilet paper.
And rubber boots. Don't forget the rubber boots.
And gas masks for the military. A company that navigated the entire Cold War by cutting these secret deals with the Soviet Union.
A company that once built a car phone.
Oh, the car phone.
That weighed nearly 10 kilograms.
That's 22 pounds. It's basically a suitcase with a handset.
And maybe the most surprising thing of all, a company that is right now, in 2026, building a 4G cellular network on the surface of the moon.
See, it's not just about phones.
Not at all. It's the ultimate masterclass in corporate adaptability. That's really the theme for today, survival.
Right.
It's about how this pulp mill became a global tech tyrant, lost it all in a crash so spectacular that business schools will be studying it for the next century.
They already are.
And then quietly, almost invisibly, reinvented itself as the backbone of the modern internet.
I love a good comeback story. And this one has everything. It has galoshes and lunar rovers. So our mission today is to unpack this whole history.
We're using the archives, the financial records.
And we really need to figure out, how did they do it? Why did they fail so spectacularly? And what on earth are they doing now?
And just to set the tone, we need to move past the memes. We all make jokes about the indestructible phones.
Breaking the floor if you drop them.
Right. But the reality of Nokia's history is way more complex. It's a story of brutal, absolutely brutal strategic pivots.
Okay, so let's rewind. And we're not starting in the 1990s with cool phones.
No. We have to go way, way back.
I'm going back to 1865.
1865. And just to give you some context, the American Civil War is just ending.
Wow.
But we're halfway across the world in the Grand Duchy of Finland. And Finland isn't even its own country yet.
It's part of the Russian Empire.
Exactly. It's under the rule of the Tsar. And this mining engineer, a man named Frederick Idestam, decides to set up a pulp mill.
A pulp mill, as in grinding up wood to make paper.
That's it. He'd been to Germany, he saw this new tech for making paper from wood pulp instead of rags, and he brought it back to the Nordics. He sets up his first mill near a city called Tampere.
Okay.
But the location of the second mill, which he builds in 1868, that's the one that really matters for our story. He builds it on the banks of the Nokia-branded River.
Nokia-branded?
Yeah, it roughly translates to Sable River. It was named after the small, black-furred animals like martens that used to live along the banks.
And the town nearby was called Nokia?
The town was called Nokia, so the name, it literally comes from a place. It wasn't dreamed up by a marketing team in some boardroom.
It was just geography. So company number one is this forestry and power generation company, Nokia AB.
Correct. But this is where we have to start thinking with the industrial logic of that time. You have a river. What does a river give you?
Water, obviously, and power.
Hydropower, a massive, reliable source of energy. So who else needs huge amounts of power and water to run their factories?
I have a feeling this is where the rubber boots come in.
It is. In 1898, a different company, the Finnish rubberworks Suomen Matetas, sets up a factory right next door to the pulp mill.
To tap into that same hydropower.
Precisely. They're making galoshes, rubber tires, industrial seals, all that stuff.
I just can't get over the image of the guys who eventually gave us the Matrix phone, the 8110 starting out making rain boots.
But it's so practical. Think about Finland. You've got snow, slush, mud for half the year. Good rubber boots are high-tech survival gear in that climate.
That's a fair point.
But then, in 1912, the third piece of this puzzle arrives. A company called the Cable Factory. Capilitatis.
Okay, so we've got paper, rubber, and cables. On the surface, it seems completely random. Why are they all clustered together on this one riverbank?
It's not random at all. Think about what an electrical cable is. You have the conductor inside, right? Usually copper, but you need to insulate it, wrap it in something so it doesn't short out.
And the best insulator in the early 20th century was rubber.
Exactly. The rubber factory was supplying the insulation for the cable factory, and the pulp mill's hydropower generators.
Supplying the electricity to run the machines for both of them.
It was a vertically integrated industrial ecosystem. It wasn't a random collection of companies at all. It was this weird symbiotic cluster feeding off the same river.
That makes so much more sense. So it wasn't that they were just eclectic for the sake of it.
Not at all. And for decades, they all operated as separate legal companies, but they had a lot of the same owners, a lot of the same investors and families.
And they finally merged into the Nokia Corporation we know in, was it 1967?
1967. A full century after that first pulp mill opened its doors.
Oh. So by the time they officially merge, the product portfolio must have been just wild. I was looking at the list. In the mid-20th century, you could walk into a store in Helsinki and buy Nokia-branded toilet paper.
They were producing soft tissue paper well into the 1960s. It was a direct byproduct of the pulp mill.
You could buy Nokian rubber boots, which, by the way, are still a thing. I actually own a pair. They're fantastic.
They are. The tire and boot divisions were eventually spun off. Nokian Tires is its own company now, a very successful one, but they all originated in that same riverbank cluster.
And then, getting a little more serious, a little darker, they were making military equipment, respirators, the M61 gas mask for the Finnish defense forces.
That's the reality of being a massive industrial conglomerate in a small country. You make what the nation needs to survive.
And Finland, geopolitically, was in a very, very tight spot.
Which leads us directly into the Cold War era.
Right, let's unpack that. Because when I think of the origins of major tech giants, I think of Silicon Valley, maybe Japan in the 80s. I don't think of a country sharing an 800-mile border with the Soviet Union.
And that border defined everything for them. This is what we call the conglomerate era, from roughly 1967 to 1990. Finland had to navigate this incredibly delicate foreign policy known as Finlandization.
Okay, explain that.
Basically, they remained officially neutral, which kept the West happy. But to avoid being invaded or controlled by Moscow, they had to maintain very close, very friendly economic ties with the USSR.
The national survival strategy.
Exactly. And Nokia became the economic engine of that strategy. They engaged in something called bilateral clearing trade.
Okay, so explain that mechanism, because it's not like they were just writing checks to Moscow, right?
No, you couldn't. The Soviet ruble was essentially worthless on the international market. It wasn't convertible, so they used a highly sophisticated barter system.
A barter system.
Yeah. Finland would import massive amounts of Soviet oil, natural gas, and raw timber. In exchange, the Soviet Union got a credit in a special account to buy Finnish manufactured goods.
So the Soviets send oil, and in return, Nokia sends what?
In the early days, cables. Miles and miles and miles of telephone and power cables to help electrify the Soviet Union. But as Nokia's electronics division grew, they started sending more advanced stuff.
Right.
Automatic telephone exchanges, industrial robotics. By the late 70s and early 80s, the Soviet Union was a massive guaranteed market for Nokia's high-tech division.
That sounds incredibly lucrative. I mean, you don't have to worry about marketing or competition. You just sign a government treaty and start shipping product.
It was a total cash cow. While other Western companies were fighting tooth and nail for 3% margins in competitive markets like France or West Germany, Nokia was setting on these fat, state-guaranteed contracts with huge profits. They were getting paid in oil money, essentially.
But the U.S. government, they couldn't have been thrilled about this. You've got a Western-leaning country selling high-tech infrastructure to the Red Army.
They were deeply paranoid about it. Washington watched Finland like a hawk. The big concern was dual-use technology.
Meaning it can be used for civilian and military purposes.
Exactly. A digital telephone switch is great for letting civilians call their grandmothers, but it's also fantastic for military command and control.
So Nokia was walking a tightrope.
A very, very thin one. It got so tense that in 1987, Finland finally agreed to join COCOM, the Coordinating Committee for Multilateral Export Controls.
What was that?
It was basically the West saying, look, if you want to keep buying our advanced microchips from Intel and Texas Instruments to build your products, you have to promise not to sell the best stuff to the Soviets.
But by then, Nokia had already made a ton of money from that trade.
They had. And this is where the CEO, a man named Kari Kairamo, enters the picture. He takes over in 1977. He was this incredibly charismatic, high-energy, some said slightly manic figure, and he had a vision.
The Nordic Japan.
That was his phrase. He looked at the vibe in the 80s, Japan was just taking over the world with Sony, Panasonic, Toyota. Kairamo wanted Nokia to be that for Europe.
And he had the cash from the Soviet trade to fund it.
Exactly. He looked at that river of money coming in and said, we are going to use this to buy our way into the West. He went on an absolutely massive acquisition spree.
Right. He bought Salora, a big Finnish TV maker.
He bought Luxor AB, the Swedish electronics giant. He bought the French TV company Oceanic.
I had no idea until we started researching for this, but at one point, Nokia was the third largest television manufacturer in all of Europe.
Behind only Philips and Thomson. They were huge in consumer electronics long before they were huge in phones. They even made personal computers.
The Micromico line.
Yep. And they bought the Beta division from their Swedish rival Ericsson. They were trying to do absolutely everything at once.
But Kairama's story, it has a really tragic ending.
It does. The stress of managing this sprawling, chaotic global empire, trying to integrate French factories with Swedish engineers and Finnish management, all while juggling the delicate politics of the Soviet trade, it clearly took a massive toll.
He tragically took his own life in 1988.
Yeah. It's a really somber note in the corporate history, and it highlights the immense pressure of that kind of rapid, debt-fueled expansion.
And it left the company in a state of chaos right as the world was about to fundamentally change.
But buried deep inside this massive, messy, grieving conglomerate, there was this one little joint venture, a division called Mobira.
This is the seed. This is 1979.
1979. Nokia teams up with Salora, this is before they fully acquired them, to create Mobira. And their goal was radio telephony, smartphones.
And in 1981, they helped launch the NMT.
The Nordic Mobile Telephone Service.
And this is a crucial piece of context, right? This wasn't just another car phone network.
No, this was a game changer. Before NMT, car phone systems were all national closed systems. If you had a Swedish car phone and you drove across the bridge to Denmark, it was a brick. It just didn't work.
So NMT was the first system that allowed for
Booming. It was the world's first international cellular network. You could drive from Sweden to Denmark to Norway to Finland, and your phone would keep working. It was the cellular internet of its day.
And to use this incredible new network, you needed hardware.
Which brings us to the Mobira Senator in 1982.
The Senator, an absolute icon of clunky 80s tech.
I was looking at the specs again this morning. 9.8 kilograms.
22 pounds.
Just try to picture that. Go to the gym, pick up a 20-pound dumbbell, and imagine holding that to your ear.
Well, you didn't hold it to your ear. That's the thing. It was this big box that you installed in the trunk of your car.
Right, with a handset wired up to the front dashboard.
So technically it was mobile, but only as mobile as your Volvo was. But here's the really interesting part. The Nokia board of directors hated it.
They didn't see the potential. Not at all. They looked at the mobile division and just saw a money pit. They called the phones James Bond gadgets.
As in, they were futuristic and cool, but only for a tiny niche market.
Exactly. They saw it as a toy for millionaire playboys and spies. They could not conceive of it as a mass-market product.
But then came the Cityman.
1987. The Mobira Cityman 900. Now, this was a handheld phone. I mean, it was still a brick by today's standards. Think of a big walkie-talkie from an 80s action movie.
But you could carry it.
You could carry it. And then marketing gold just fell into their laps. Mikhail Gorbachev,
The leader of the Soviet Union.
he was in Helsinki for a state visit, and there's this famous photograph of him standing outside his hotel, holding a Mobira Cityman to his ear, making a call to his ministers back in Moscow.
It became known as the Gorba phone.
That one image went viral before viral was even a thing. It was this incredible signal to the world. This wasn't just a toy anymore. This was a tool of power. If the leader of the entire Eastern Bloc is using a Nokia to run his empire from a sidewalk in Finland,
It's a serious device.
it put them on the map.
Okay, so we're moving into the 90s, and this is where the story shifts gears, violently. 1990, 1991, The Berlin Wall has fallen. Soviet Union collapses.
And for Nokia, this was an economic heart attack.
Because that bilateral clearing trade, that guaranteed profit.
It vanished overnight. Their biggest, most profitable customer just ceased to exist. The contracts were void. The whole country of Finland plunged into a deep, deep depression.
And Nokia is bleeding money. Their stock price crashes. They're this cluttered closet of all these random businesses, TVs, cables, tires, computers, and none of them are making enough money to cover the losses from the Soviet collapse.
It was a near-death experience, and this is when Jorma Ollila takes over as CEO in 1992. And honestly, the logical move, what any normal CEO would have done, was to break up the company and sell off the assets.
But he didn't do that.
No, he made one of the boldest, most audacious bets in modern business history.
The great focus.
He looked at this whole mess of a company and he said, we are selling everything.
Everything that isn't phones.
Everything. The tires spun off into their own company. The TVs sold. The power generation business gone. He said, from now on, we are going to be a telecommunications company. Period.
That is terrifying. To give up these stable 100-year-old industries like rubber and power generation to bet the entire farm on cell phones, which were still a pretty new thing.
It was a total existential gamble, but Ollila saw the next wave coming. He saw the GSM revolution.
Global system for mobile communications.
Right. Nokia had been one of the key developers of the GSM standard.
What made GSM so different from the old analog systems like NMT?
It was digital. And that meant a few huge things. One, much better voice quality and more security. You couldn't just tune in with a radio scanner and eavesdrop on calls anymore.
Okay.
But most importantly, it was designed for data from the ground up. It allowed for something revolutionary. SMS text messaging.
The first GSM call ever made was in 1991, wasn't it?
Yep. By the Finnish Prime Minister at the time, Harry Holkeri, using a Nokia prototype phone on a network built with Nokia equipment, Ollila knew this standard was going to conquer the world. And he was absolutely right.
The financial turnaround was just, it's insane. They went from a huge operating loss in 1991
to making $4 billion in operating profit by 1999.
It's the hockey stick growth curve that every Silicon Valley startup dreams of. But this was a 100-year-old industrial giant from Finland doing it.
A total transformation.
So let's talk about why they won. Because in the 90s, it wasn't just them. You had Motorola, you had Ericsson. Motorola literally invented the portable cell phone. Why did Nokia just blow past them?
I think it came down to a fundamental difference in philosophy. Motorola was an engineering company. They built radios for the police, for the military. Their phones were designed as rugged, functional tools for business.
Utilitarian.
Very. Nokia, and maybe this comes from their background in consumer electronics with the TVs, they understood something profound. They understood that a phone wasn't just a tool, it was a lifestyle device.
They went after the youth market.
Exactly. Think of the phones. The Nokia 5110, the 3210. These weren't boring gray business phones. They were fun, and they had the killer feature, Express on covers.
Oh, absolutely. I had a metallic blue one for my 5110. My friend had one with a flame pattern. It sounds so silly now, but being able to change the color of your phone was mind-blowing at the time.
It was genius. It turned a piece of technology into a fashion accessory. You could match it to your outfit. It made the phone personal, an expression of your identity. Motorola didn't get that. Ericsson didn't get that.
And then, of course, the software. The usability was just on another level.
The Navi key interface, that one big button that let you do almost everything, it was so intuitive. My grandmother could use a Nokia. She couldn't get her head around a Motorola StarTAC.
And Lawn Snake.
We cannot overstate the importance of the Game Snake.
It was a killer app.
It was the first mobile app that really mattered. It created an emotional bond with the device. You were bored at the bus stop. You played Snake, waiting for a friend. Snake, It locked people into the Nokia ecosystem.
So by 1998, they do it. They overtake Motorola to become the best-selling mobile phone brand in the entire world.
And they manufactured their 100 millionth phone that same year, in December 1998.
And the economic impact on Finland. I mean, it's hard for us to even comprehend in a country the size of the U.S.
It's almost impossible. Imagine if Apple, Google, and Microsoft were all one single company, and that company was based in a country the size of, say, Minnesota.
Okay.
By the year 2000, Nokia alone accounted for 4% of Finland's entire gross domestic product.
4% of the whole economy. From one company. That is staggering.
And 21% of their total exports.
A fifth.
1/5 of everything Finland sold to the rest of the world came from this one company. They literally called it the Nokia miracle. It lifted the entire country out of that post-Soviet depression.
And they were still innovating. I think we forget this part because of how the story ends. But in the early 2000s, they were pushing boundaries that nobody else was even touching.
Oh, they were way ahead. The Nokia 7650, that was the first mass-market phone with a built-in camera. The very concept of taking a photo and instantly being able to send it to someone. Nokia did that first.
The N-series phones were incredible.
The N95, it launched in late 2006, just before the iPhone, and people forget what a beast that thing was.
It had GPS.
It had Wi-Fi, a 5-megapixel camera with a Carl Zeiss lens, which was unheard of. It had a proper web browser, 3G support. It was a multimedia computer, as they called it. It was a smartphone. It just didn't have a capacitive touchscreen.
And then there was the N-Gage.
Ah, the taco phone.
It really did look like a taco when you held it up to your head to talk.
It was an unmitigated commercial disaster, but you have to respect the ambition. They were trying to take on Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance.
Right. The head of entertainment at Nokia, Ilkka Räikkönen, he famously said, Game Boy is for 10-year-olds.
The implication being that the N-Gage was for cool, mature, sophisticated gamers?
It failed so miserably.
It was a mess. The buttons were mushy, it wasn't comfortable to hold, and to change the game cartridge, you had to turn off the phone, take the back cover off, and remove the battery.
What a design flaw.
A catastrophic one. But it showed their mindset at the time. They thought they were invincible. They thought they could conquer any market, gaming included, just by showing up with the Nokia brand on a product.
And honestly, if you look at the numbers in 2007, you can see why they were so arrogant.
You really can.
In the fourth quarter of 2007, Nokia's global market share for mobile phones peaked.
At 40.4%.
That's just dominance. That's nearly half of all the phones sold on the entire planet. If you walked into a room of 10 people, 4 of them had a Nokia in their pocket.
And that is the precise moment at the absolute peak of their power that the ground started to crumble beneath their feet.
The burning platform.
Exactly. But before the famous memo, there was the device. January 2007, Steve Jobs walks on stage in San Francisco.
And introduces the iPhone. And the standard narrative we all know is, iPhone arrives, Nokia dies immediately. But that's not actually what the data shows, is it?
No, it's a simplification. In terms of sheer volume, Nokia had their best sales years after the iPhone launched. 2008 and 2009 were still huge for them, especially in developing markets. The rot was internal.
It wasn't just that the iPhone was cooler.
No, it was that Nokia's entire foundation was rotten.
Okay, let's get a bit technical here. Why couldn't they just make a touchscreen phone to compete? They had the engineers, they had the money.
They did, but they had the wrong operating system. They were all in on Symbian.
Okay, so explain Symbian. What was the problem?
Symbian was a marvel of engineering for its time. It was designed in the 90s for devices with very limited memory and very slow processors. To do that, it had to be hyper-efficient.
But that made the code incredibly complex.
Incredibly. As phones got more powerful, Nokia just kept piling more features and more code on top of this aging, intricate foundation.
It became spaghetti code.
The worst kind. By 2010, Symbian was millions and millions of lines of code. To add a simple new feature or to completely change the user interface to work well with a touchscreen was a developer's nightmare.
I read some accounts from engineers who worked there at the time. They said the compile time. So the time it takes to turn the written code into a working program you can test.
It was up to 48 hours.
Wait. So if I'm a developer and I think I fixed a bug, I have to wait 2 full days to find out if my fix actually worked.
In some cases, yes. Meanwhile, over at Apple, an iOS engineer could iterate on their code in minutes. You simply cannot compete with that speed. Symbian was a burning platform because it was structurally incapable of evolving fast enough to catch iOS or Android.
And corporate culture had changed too. It wasn't the nimble innovator anymore.
It had become a bloated bureaucracy. Former employees described it as Soviet style. You had these powerful middle managers fighting each other over resources. If your team had a great idea for a touch interface, the team in charge of the button interface would try to kill it because it threatened their jobs and their bonuses.
So they were fighting themselves instead of the competition.
They were paralyzed by their own success.
So 2010 rolls around, the situation's looking shaky, the board makes a big move, they hire Stephen Elop.
The first non-Finnish CEO in the company's history, and he comes from Microsoft.
And soon after he arrives, he sends one of the most famous internal memos in corporate history. the burning platform.
He tells this story, this parable, about a man working on an oil rig in the North Sea.
Right, an explosion wakes him up. He runs to the edge of the platform. Behind him is a wall of fire. Below him is the dark, freezing cold ocean.
And he has a choice. Stay on the platform and die in the fire, or jump into the icy water and maybe survive. He jumps.
And Elop was telling his employees, Symbian is the burning platform. If we stay on it, we will die. We have to jump.
And the jump he chose for them was Windows Phone.
This is the moment. The decision that business historians will argue about forever.
It's the great pivot. And Nokia really had three options at that point. Option 1, try to fix Symbian, which, as we said, was basically impossible.
Right.
Option 2, go with Android, like Samsung, HTC, and Motorola were all doing. And option 3, partner with Microsoft on their new Windows Phone OS.
So why didn't they choose Android? In hindsight, it seems like such an obvious move. Android was free, it was gaining traction, it was getting the apps.
Elop's public argument was about differentiation. He believed that if Nokia used Android, they would just become one of many manufacturers making black rectangles.
A commodity hardware maker.
Exactly. He worried they'd be fighting Samsung and others on price with razor-thin margins, and that Google would end up capturing all the value from the software and services, not Nokia.
So he wanted to be the big fish in a new, smaller pond.
He wanted to create a third ecosystem to challenge the duopoly of Apple and Google. And Microsoft was desperate for a major hardware partner. They threw billions of dollars in marketing support at Nokia, so Elop made the call. They jumped to Windows.
And then came the tactical error, the Osborne effect.
This was the killer. Elop announced the switch to Windows Phone in February of 2011. He effectively stood up and told the whole world, Symbian is dead. But the first Nokia Windows Phone wasn't ready yet. It wouldn't be ready to ship for another 9 months.
So he told consumers, don't buy our current phones, they're obsolete.
Yeah.
But he had no new phones to sell them.
Exactly. Sales of Symbian phones didn't just decline, they completely collapsed overnight. Revenue fell off a cliff. The company started burning through its massive cash reserves, just trying to keep the lights on. The stock price tanked, falling below $2 a share by mid-2012.
And when the new Lumia phones finally did arrive,
They were beautiful. I will die on this hill. The hardware was stunning. The Lumia 800 with its polycarbonate unibody, the Lumia 920 with its optical image stabilization.
the colors, the bright yellow and cyan.
And the cameras were incredible. The Lumia 1020 had a 41 megapixel sensor in 2013. It was years, and I mean years ahead of Apple and Samsung in photography.
What?
But the app gap, it was real and it was fatal. Developers didn't want to build for a third ecosystem with a tiny market share. So you had Instagram on iPhone, you had it on Android. For the longest time, you didn't have it on Windows Phone. A customer would walk into a store, fall in love with the Nokia hardware, ask, does it have Snapchat? Hear the word no, and walk out with a Samsung Galaxy.
It was a death by 1,000 cuts, which leads to the inevitable. 2013, Nokia sells its phone business.
To Microsoft for 5.44 billion euros.
The chairman at the time, Risto Siilasmaa, had this heartbreaking quote. He called the decision rationally correct, but emotionally difficult.
For Finland, it was a national trauma. The pride of the nation, the brand that put them on the global map, was being sold off to an American tech giant. Microsoft took over the factories, the designers, the Lumia brand name. It felt like the end.
But, and this is the big pivot, the reason we're doing this deep dive, that wasn't the end of Nokia.
No, this is the part most people completely missed. When they sold the devices and services division, they didn't sell the whole company. They kept 3 key assets.
Okay, let's list them. What was left?
Number 1, Nokia Networks. This was their big, boring, but profitable infrastructure business. The cell towers, the network switches, all the back-end gear that makes mobile networks run.
Okay.
Number 2, HERE, Maps. This was their world-class digital mapping division. For in-car navigation, it was actually better than Google Maps in many ways at the time.
And number 3,
Nokia Technologies, which was basically their treasure chest of patents. Decades of R&D. Thousands upon thousands of essential patents for mobile communication.
So even if you buy a Samsung or an Apple phone today, a tiny slice of that money is still going to Nokia in royalties.
Essentially, yes. So they had these 3 pieces. They made a quick strategic decision to sell the Maps division. They sold HERE Maps to a consortium of German car makers, Audi, BMW, Daimler, for 2.8 billion euros.
So they cashed that out?
Cashed it out. So now they're sitting on a huge pile of cash from the Microsoft deal and the German car guys deal. What do they do with it?
They doubled down on being the plumbers of the internet.
That's the perfect way to put it. In 2015, they made a massive acquisition. They bought their French-American rival, Alcatel-Lucent, for 15.6 billion euros.
That's a huge deal. That's almost 3 times what they got for the phone business.
It was transformative, and it brought two absolute jewels into the Nokia crown. First, and maybe most importantly, Bell Labs.
The Bell Labs, as in New Jersey, the invention of the transistor, the laser, the solar cell, Bell Labs.
The very same, one of the most legendary research and development centers in the history of science. That is now a Nokia research center. It gave them immense R&D credibility and a pipeline of future tech.
That's incredible. And the second jewel?
Submarine cables. Alcatel had a division called Alcatel Submarine Networks, or ASN.
This is a part of the internet we never think about. We talk about the cloud, but the cloud is actually at the bottom of the ocean.
It is. 99% of all international data traffic travels through these undersea fiber optic cables, not satellites. And Nokia, through this acquisition, now owns a fleet of cable-laying ships.
I looked these up. The CS Isle de San, the CS Isle d'Oisson. These are massive high-tech vessels.
They're floating factories. They sail out into the middle of the Atlantic or the Pacific, spooling out thousands of miles of fiber optic cable, thinner than a human hair, onto the ocean floor. They have these underwater plows to bury the cable so fishing nets don't snag it. They have robot submarines to go down and fix breaks.
So while we were all mourning the loss of our unbreakable brick phones, Nokia was busy literally wiring the planet together.
They completely shifted their focus, from the device in your hand to the invisible network that makes that device useful. If you're listening to this deep dive right now, the data packets carrying our voices probably traveled through a Nokia-made switch or a Nokia-laid cable at some point on their journey to you.
But they did have a weird little identity crisis for a bit there, didn't they? Do you remember the OZO camera?
Oh, the VR camera. The big black ball that looked like a probe droid from The Empire Strikes Back.
That was 2015. VR was supposed to be the next big thing. And Nokia jumped in with this professional-grade 360-degree camera.
It cost $60,000.
60 grand. Who was buying that?
Disney bought some major movie studios. But the consumer VR revolution didn't really happen, at least not as fast as everyone thought. So Nokia killed the whole product line in 2017.
They also bought that digital health company, Withings.
They did in 2016. They made those smart scales and watches.
I actually have a Withings scale. I had no idea it was owned by Nokia for a while.
It was branded Nokia Digital Health for about 2 years. And then they seemed to realize, you know what? We're a business-to-business company now. We're not good at consumer marketing anymore.
So they sold it back to the original founder of Withings in 2018.
Yeah, which feels like a very mature, disciplined decision. We tried it. It didn't fit our core mission. Let's cut our losses and move on.
It's very different from the Cairo Mo era in the 80s where they tried to do everything at once.
The modern Nokia is very quick to kill things that don't fit the core strategy.
Except, I can still walk into a Best Buy today and see a Nokia phone on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a rugged Nokia smartphone last week, so explain that.
That is a clever bit of branding, sleight of hand. That is a company called HMD Global.
Okay, who are they?
In 2016, the new focused Nokia realized that the brand name itself still had a lot of value and nostalgia attached to it, even if they themselves didn't want to be in the risky business of manufacturing phones.
Right.
So a new separate company was formed in Finland called HMD Global. It was run mostly by former Nokia executives who had left during the Microsoft years.
So the band got back together, sort of.
Kind of, and HMD cut a deal. They licensed the Nokia brand name, they designed the phones, but the actual manufacturing is done by Foxconn, the same company that makes iPhones.
It's a smart asset-light model.
Mm-hmm.
Nokia gets paid a royalty for the use of its name, but takes zero risk on inventory or factories.
Exactly. And HMD has played the nostalgia card perfectly. One of the first things they did was re-release an updated version of the 3310.
I remember that.
They also re-released the 8110, the banana phone from the Matrix. It got them tons of headlines. But alongside that, they also make solid, no-nonsense Android smartphones that get good reviews for their clean software.
So the brand we knew lives on in our pockets as a kind of ghost, an echo. But the real Nokia, the corporation, is doing something very different in the 2020s.
They are now strictly a business-to-business or B2B company. They're the world's third largest network equipment manufacturer, right up there with their old rival Ericsson and the Chinese giant Huawei.
And geopolitics is helping them again, isn't it? Just like in the Cold War, international politics is shaping their profit margins.
It's amazing how history repeats itself. When the U.S. government and other Western nations started banning Huawei and ZTE from their 5G networks due to national security concerns,
There were only two major non-Chinese suppliers left.
Nokia and Ericsson. Suddenly, if you're a carrier like AT&T or Verizon in the US or a carrier in the UK or Australia, and you need to build out your 5G network, and you're forbidden from using the Chinese gear, you call the Finns or the Swedes,
Nokia became the safe geopolitical choice for the West.
a trusted partner. It's been a huge boost for their business.
And now, they're looking beyond Earth entirely. We teased this at the very beginning, the moon.
This is my favorite part of the modern Nokia story. In 2020, NASA awarded Nokia a $14.1 million contract as part of its Tipping Point technology program.
To build a 4G network on the moon. My first question is, why? Why do astronauts need LTE? It's not so they can check Instagram from the lunar surface.
No, it's all about creating reliable communications infrastructure for the Artemis missions. Right now, when a lunar rover talks to the lander or the lander talks back to Earth, it's all point-to-point radio. It uses a lot of power, and the bandwidth is relatively low.
So if you want to send back high-definition video of a moonwalk or control a robot arm in real time, traditional radio is a bottleneck.
Exactly. A 4G LTE network is incredibly efficient. It provides high bandwidth and low latency over long distances with very compact, low-power hardware. Nokia is essentially building a network in a box. The base station gets mounted on the side of the lunar lander, and then the rovers and the astronauts' gear can connect to it just like your phone connects to a cell tower.
What are the technical challenges there? I have to imagine the moon is a slightly harsher environment than downtown Helsinki.
Just a bit. You have extreme cosmic radiation that can fry electronics. You have temperatures that swing hundreds of degrees from boiling hot in the sun to cryogenically cold in the shade. And you have the intense vibration and shock of a rocket launch and landing. The hardware has to be, well, Nokia tough, bomb-proof.
If they pull this off, and the mission is expected to deploy fully this year or next, it's a massive technological flex.
It's the ultimate marketing campaign. It proves to the world that their technology is robust enough for space exploration, which means it's definitely robust enough for a factory floor or a shipping port on Earth.
Okay, let's bring it right up to the present day. February 2026. The company looks very different, even than it did just 5 years ago.
They went through a huge rebrand in 2023.
The logo changed?
I remember the controversy online. They ditched that classic familiar Yale blue typeface that we all knew from the phones.
And they replaced it with this jagged, abstract, very modern-looking logo. Some of the letters have strokes missing. It's very stylized.
People hated it at first. Of course they did.
People always hate change.
But the message behind it was strategically brilliant. They were shouting from the rooftops, "We are not the phone company you remember. We are a B2B deep tech innovation company." The old logo was consumer-friendly. The new logo is enterprise-focused.
And the leadership has shifted. Pekka Lundmark was the CEO who steered them through that tough restructuring in the early 2020s. But as of last year, there's a new face at the top.
Justin Hotard. He was announced as the new CEO in February 2025 and officially took the reins in March. So he's been in the job for almost a full year now.
And his background tells you everything you need to know about where Nokia is heading.
He didn't come from telecom. He came from HP Enterprise. His background is in high-performance computing and artificial intelligence.
So Nokia isn't just about connecting people anymore. It's about connecting massive AI data centers.
Precisely. Just look at their recent strategic moves. In June of 2024, they acquired a company called Infinera for $2.3 billion.
What do they do?
They're a leader in optical networking. Basically, they make the hardware that makes fiber optic pipes faster, more efficient. And then in late 2025, they announced a major partnership with Supermicro,
Who are big in the AI server space.
So Nokia is betting their future on the idea that the AI boom is going to require a massive upgrade to the underlying data movement infrastructure of the internet, and they want to be the ones selling the picks and shovels for that gold rush.
It's the same logic as the 19th century. Back then, they provided the power and the cables for the first industrial revolution. Now they're providing the bandwidth and the optical systems for the AI revolution.
And to bring things full circle, they had to exit Russia completely in 2022.
It's a sad closing of a circle.
It really is. The company that grew fat and powerful on Soviet trade in the 70s and 80s had to completely sever those ties after the invasion of Ukraine. They dismantled their networks there and left the country for good. It shows how much the world has changed and how Nokia has had to change with it.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this whole epic journey. We've gone from a pulp mill in the Russian Empire to a 4G base station on the moon in 2026. What is the ultimate takeaway here?
For me, the takeaway is that Nokia is a lesson in the brutal, painful necessity of letting go.
Letting go of the thing that made you famous and successful.
Exactly. Most great companies die because they hug their cash cow to death long after it stopped giving milk. Kodak couldn't let go of photographic film. Blockbuster couldn't let go of physical video rentals.
And Nokia was the absolute king of mobile phones. It was their entire identity. For Finland, it was their national pride.
And they let it burn. They accepted that the platform was on fire, and they made the jump. They gave up the consumer glory and the brand recognition to survive in the boring, invisible world of infrastructure.
They proved that a brand can effectively die in the consumer's hand, but thrive in the unseen machinery of the world.
They are the invisible giants now.
And it was the right move.
I think it's undeniable. If they hadn't sold the phone division to Microsoft when they did, they would almost certainly be bankrupt today. Instead, they are profitable, they own Bell Labs, and they're putting a network on the moon.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought experiment. A big what if.
Go for it.
If Nokia, back in 2011, under Stephen Elop, had made a different choice, if they had chosen Android instead of Windows Phone, would we all be carrying Nokia devices today?
It's the great counterfactual of the mobile industry.
Would Samsung just be a minor player in the phone market? Would Nokia have used its superior hardware engineering and brand loyalty to become the undisputed king of the Android world? Or was their transition into becoming the plumbers of the internet the only way they could have truly survived the smartphone wars?
It's a tough one, my personal take. If they'd gone with Android, they'd be fighting a brutal low-margin war with Samsung and a dozen Chinese manufacturers today. They might still exist as a phone brand, but they would have been a shadow of their former selves. I don't think they would have had the capital or the focus to buy Alcatel-Lucent, to own Bell Labs, or to go to the moon.
So the jump into the icy water was the right call.
I think the jump into the icy water, the painful, humiliating sale to Microsoft, was the move that actually saved the organism in the long run.
A truly fascinating history, from the riverbanks of Tampere to the craters of the moon. Thank you for walking us through this.
My pleasure. It's an incredible story.
And to our listener, thanks for spending your Valentine's Saturday with us. Keep connecting people, however you choose to do it. We'll see you in the next deep dive.